I have to go back in time to an episode, I think it was called The 3 Ps, Picking Your Primes and Pricey Picks. I think this episode is going to outprice that. As today, taking the chance to talk to you guys about entities. Both sides of the arrow coin. Okay, so War of Light introduced the entities. They're cool. I've managed to get my hands on 3 of them myself. I managed to get my hands on 2 offensive ones, Ophidian and Heroclix, and 1 of the supporting role ones, which would be Adara. I have yet to get my hands on an entity, but time will tell, and time has been very nice to me on these. We're filming this the week of Canadian Nationals, so we're a little scatterbrained right now. We've been testing and testing and testing our teams to the limits. We are blind. We think we're ready. I think I can make the top 16. I think. Anyway, focus here. So, entities are a thing that we know existed. They're a thing we know we were going to have to deal with at some point. And in our training, we've come to accept their place in the game. They are good. They're good. 25 points gets you a figure that allows you each turn to increase a stat, so long as on the dial, the stat that matches that you're trying to increase is higher on the entity dial than it is on the character dial. So, for instance, Ophidian on his first click has 12 attack, or 12 movement, 11 attack, 18 defense, and 4 damage. Also 8 range. So, if anything on the possessee is lower than that, Ophidian can choose one of those to increase. Just one. It's kind of like a perplex with a huge limit. But you'll also get to take one of the powers on the dial, showing on the dial, and use that for your character, which is also equally good when you can consider that a lot of the entities have a special power, and a lot of those special powers come with quintessence. So, as you can imagine, they're a very versatile choice in the game. Now, as far as cost effectiveness, it's a 50-50. It's not as, like, point for point, you're not getting the same effectiveness out of it as your, say, the utility belt. Utility belt at 14 points, you get big numbers out of occasionally. You get +2 to all stats at some points. You also get a power to go with it, but you also get a little bit of inconsistency as the dice rolls. You do get a lot of the same inconsistency with these entities. Allow me to explain. As your character who's possessed with these entities takes some damage, the entity dial takes damage. So you're kind of playing a flip-flop game, because sometimes the entity takes damage and goes down to a 10 attack. Now, given the current metagame, a lot of things stay at 10 attack, maybe get down to 9 attack at some points. And, 17 is a pretty average defense, so if that 17 is able to raise your defense, you're already in a lot of trouble. Ophidian himself manages to keep pretty consistent 4 damage until about click 6. Now, the other thing you gotta worry about is, when you're choosing your entity, where does your dial match up? And other such thoughts. So Heroclix and Ophidian, as far as a forward-facing offensive strategy, they're strong characters. Ophidian has slightly higher offensive and defensive defensive stats. Like, he's got the 18 defense versus Heroclix's 17. On average, a lot of characters just start out with 17 defense, so Heroclix's first click doesn't see a lot of defense raising. It does see a lot of attack and damage raising, as Heroclix does have a 12 attack and 4 damage. Given the 300-point metagame, which is the one we work with on this show, Heroclix and Ophidian do fit in very well offensively. And never discount the fact that when you're across the board from him, or he's on your side, Ophidian starts with Pulse Wave. That can make some characters pretty potent. I don't know, like a certain mammal that came in a starter set. Anyway, so as far as these characters are concerned, they're good, but they're not quite as game-breaking as a lot of people are saying. I'm going to get into that part a little later. I just want to explain the entities first, how they fit into the metagame, how they're strong, where they're weak, and then we're going to talk about dealing with them and what they deal with, in fact, as part of the metagame. So we're going to move on to, the only one I've acquired is Adara, but there is also the Entity, who is the White Lantern version, Adara being the Blue Lantern version. Now, Adara has already made a butt ton of noise, and that reason is that she has Defend. I'm guessing it's a she. I nicknamed it Articuno a little while because it looks like the Arctic bird from Pokemon. But it starts with Defend. We're going to go with an it because it's an entity. 18 defense with Defend. Now, that 18 defense is great. Defend is even better because the noise being made with this character has been with the Sinestro Core Virus in Despotellus. DC, you missed a big opportunity instead of calling him Despotellus, you could have called him Despolitis. But I'm over it. Despotellus starts with a 20 defense. So, slap an Adara on it, he becomes a 55-point character that gives everybody Jason Dome 20 defense. Pretty cool, right? The problem I see in that particular strategy is you're only using half of the effectiveness of this particular entity. So I'm a little uncomfortable with it myself. But you also, in some situations, I can see myself taking Despotellus and say, TK something. Or, you have probability control now, Despotellus, but you're still only able to use the powers because Despotellus comes with a trait that says his stats can't be increased. That's a problem. As you can't perplex him up, but you can most certainly perplex him down. As his stats are allowed to be decreased, just not increased. Now, I've said a couple things already, but I want to talk about the overall effectiveness of them. A lot of people look at them and say they're an egg in one basket. Here's the big complaint, the realistic complaint about them. They're chases. They're chases for an OP set. OP being organized play. And what that means is, they're hard as heck to acquire. You have to get to these tournaments in order to do it, or you have to be a little bit sleazy and buy a brick online. Enjoy the car payment. Or you're paying for them individually. And the reason these guys became expensive in a hurry is because of the rarity of the OP set. This happened with Fear itself as well. It's not readily available. It's not off the shelf. You have to go to these events to go. Some people have been going and leaving the events. That's a public service announcement of itself. I'm not going to get into that. The point is that these things have become expensive on the secondary market. And the reason people are complaining is because these things have become expensive on the secondary market. This isn't an Infinity Gauntlet situation. This isn't a Bat Belt situation. This isn't a Book of Skulls situation. Not everybody has these things. So when you see them across the board and somebody using them effectively, you become perturbed by it. It's easy to... It can happen to anybody. It's frustrating to see something doing well that you can't get your hands on. That you feel that it's a pay game. But I want people to understand is that these things are beatable. You only get the choice of one power with these things at a time. And depending on where their dial is, these are a lot of powers that are already easily dealt with. For instance, Ophidian starts with, on its first click, Sidestep, cute, 2 movement. Pulse Wave, stay out of the character's range. I don't remember what the damage power was, but I believe it has something to do with plasticity. I don't have the card on me right now. Why do I do this all the time? Anyway, but it also has Invulnerable. Invulnerable is dealt with Pulse Wave, with plasticity, not plasticity, Psychic Blast, with Exploit Weakness. These things all exist on dials already, so that's already not a threat. Pulse Wave a little bit more of a threat, but, I mean, if the character doesn't come with Running Shot, it's a little harder. Parallax is a little stronger, comes with Psychic Blast, a little bit more of a direct strategy. Comes with Stealth, which is good depending on the board it's across from. I mean, the Stealth is going to do you no good against a Bullseye, because Bullseye goes through that Stealth. It's going to do you no good against an Iron Pharaoh as that bird creeps closer and closer to you, because that bird doesn't care about terrain. Adara is a support one, so I mean, if you're using an Adara to create a support character, you already lack support characters. Or, you know, I mean, now, personally, I would take a character like Adara and go with a higher stat, more aggressive, stronger character to add a supporting element to it. Adding probability control to a character who's already pretty strong is a good idea. Adding TK to anybody who's not necessarily about to attack, but, you know, is a character that stays in the back. Why the heck not, right? And defend, if your character that you're using has a naturally high defense. I mean, an 18 defense is pretty reasonable to get up. Nothing to rely on. So, and Adara has some pretty neat stats across the board. 11 movement, 11 attack, 18 defense. The 3 damage, you're probably not going to be upping a whole lot of things, but it can turn a support character into a slightly more violent character with the damage, right? So, I've talked circles around it. What are the big strengths about these things? Well, they're extra bonuses that aren't resources, which means you can have a team with the Book Skulls, you can have a team with the Infinity Gauntlet, you can have a team with a Bat Belt, even a character with an... Infinity Gauntlet's out of the metagame. I gotta stop saying that. But they can have a utility, but they can have a Book Skulls, they can have a Power Plant, they can have a Power Battery. And these characters can still go on other characters. But because of the nature of the way that these things move with the dial of the character that they're possessing, they're not as super reliable. Now, where they become strong, Lydia Manor and White Witch were used in the Origins Nationals for the United States. Anyway, border of us. He piloted a team where the only offense really came from Lydia Manor and the White Witch, but the Book of Skulls was on their team. But those characters had Parallax and Ophidian to back them up. Parallax, I could definitely see on the White Witch adding that Psychic Blast to her already high 7 range. Adding to her attack value, her range value, her damage value. All the stats can be increased by the Parallax. In addition to the fact that the White Witch can take a free action to stop your free actions. Right? So, that was pretty cool. And he had a Lydia Manor and he had an Ophidian. I might be actually quoting these wrong. Anyway, it's neither here nor there. Lydia Manor, White Witch were on the team. Parallax, Ophidian were on the team. Some other things were on the team along with the Book of Skulls. So, he piloted that to great success, but since then, that team hasn't been copied. Again, I get back to saying how healthy the new metagame is. The new metagame is based on playing your team to death and playing against other teams. So understanding what you're going to have to play against and being ready to play against it is really the big part of it. Now, where these guys have really started to shine and has also made this episode significantly more expensive, thank you to the person who sent this to us, whose Amber's name is going to drop over mine.
Shannon Higgins.
Shannon Higgins,
yes.
Who got us the Iron Pharaoh. He sent this to us the week before it jumped in price, and we love you, Shannon. You're the best. As a result of it, I want to point out is Iron Pharaoh was already a meta counter meta. He was countering the mystical meta which existed, which he's also part of. He now becomes part of the entity meta counter. Allow me to explain. The entities themselves, they add their keywords to the character they're possessing. So if I put Parallax, say, on the Iron Pharaoh, he gains Sinestro Core, Entity, and Cosmic. What do the other entities have? Their specific Lantern Core, Entity, and Cosmic. So now the Iron Pharaoh gains those 2 keywords. Now where that becomes pivotal is his trait where whenever he attacks the character that shares a keyword with him, he gets +1 attack, +1 damage. Do you see where my brain just kind of went with that? Do you see what happened here? What has happened is that Iron Pharaoh became stronger by being able to counter the meta. That's probably why he doubled in price, because somebody opened their big mouth and mentioned that. That's how these things go. Another thing that is great about the entities is that they subsequently take Iron Man from the 10th anniversary set, the one that counters resources, and says, I don't care that you counter a resource, I'm not a resource. So now he is vulnerable to the attack of a character who doesn't have a resource and an entity and just has an entity. So this is what's happened with the entities. They are strong. They've made strong characters stronger. They've made weak characters playable, but not in the sense of like overplayable. They've just added more versatility. And like I said, this is where the game is going. I think, and don't quote me on this because this probably isn't actually the fact, they added the Justice League 52 to the cuts in the Golden Age, and if you'll notice that my episode when I talked about the Golden Age, or the Modern Age meta cuts, a lot of those characters were really small point, one-dimensional characters. I think the game, noticing the game is shifting from one-dimensional characters being on the map where they don't, like, characters who have no purpose on the board other than to do one thing, not just, you know, sit there and perplex. Like, there's characters that used to sit there and perplex, sit there and TK. Some of them would never leave the starting area. Split Lip is in danger of never leaving the starting area a lot of the time, in spite of his enhancement. That's kind of where the game shifted away. Like, the game seems to be shifting away from that. We're slowly seeing the phasing out of one-dimensional characters, and we're starting to see the growth of multi-dimensional characters. And any one-dimensional characters are actually getting boosted by things that aren't on the board. Your support is no longer on the board. That's what I'm starting to notice. Your support is off the board, and it's in these things like resources. It's in these things like the entities. What it does is you no longer have that character. Oh, that's just gonna die if I put it out a little further than a certain distance. There is that's slowly disappearing. It's go time, and that's the meta. It's go time. Let's play. Let's kill each other, and let's make this game awesome. So the entities help towards that. The entities are good. They're not game-breaking, if you ask me. The only issue is that, yes, they're expensive and hard to get. So that's a lot of the fear of it. It's not that we have an uber-powerful thing that you can't get. We have a strong thing that is so hard to get. And that creates an element where everybody's like, it's so strong. Fear not the entities, if you ask me. I'm not afraid of them. I'm ready to play with them. I'm ready to play against them. But going into Canadian Nationals, I put my thought into them. You've heard my thoughts now. Give us your thoughts down below. What do you think of the entities? Do you think they're too strong? Do you think they're not strong enough? Do you think they're just an element that we got to get used to? And somebody's going to find a way to beat them sooner or later. Comments down below, as always. Let's get us... We're... At the time of this filming, I think we're 2, maybe 1 person away from 500 subscribers. We're excited to hit 500, guys, and we're going to have something for you in the form of a big old Phoenix resource. We'll get a video set up to do a competition once we hit 500 subscribers, and we'll figure out how we're going to make you guys work for it. It might not be a meta fix. It might be a little bit more of a fun strategy this time. So, that said, thank you guys for watching. Wish us luck at Canadian Nationals this weekend. We should have an episode of Dial It Up this week.
Should be.
Amber gave me a funny face, so possibly. We're going to try to cram it out as much as we can. And come Sunday, we plan on hopefully releasing a little bit of a preamble what we played, but we're going to release it on Sunday so that people don't know ahead of time what we played, and we're not posting it all over the place, because, you know, we do want to go in with the surprise level that we think we have. Have a good one, guys.